Hey everybody, welcome back to Paul's Painting Tips, where I give you tips, sometimes tricks, and just my overall paint knowledge that I've gained from nearly 20 years in the industry. One of the things I want to talk about today is adding Floetrol, additives in the paint, additives to your primers, your finish coats, stuff like that. The other thing too I want to talk about is just your general step skipping when it comes to certain stuff like a liquid sandpaper, for example, how you can avoid using liquid sandpaper and some other stuff that sounds like a shortcut, but it's really not at the end of the day. So let's start with flow and leveling agents. There is a ton of them out there, extenders too, not just flow and leveling agents. It's stuff that gives you more open time. It's unbelievable how much I see on social media when it comes to some of these flow and leveling agents and extenders, and oh, this works great, it does this, it does that. And I'll put a picture of some of the ones that I know of off the top of my head on the screen. I'd like to hear in the comments what you guys use, especially for the professional guys, what you might be using and what products you might be using it in. It would be interesting to hear because I can't tell you how often I would see this out in the field, and it's usually when something fails. And from a manufacturing side, we never recommend, especially adding flow and leveling agents. And I recall a time, the first job I had in the paint industry, I had a guy bring a 5 gallon bucket back, and he goes, "Hey, this stuff is all chunky. It's clumpy. It's awful." And I told him, I said, "Okay, well, my first thought was, as we all know, for the most part, if you don't know, when paint freezes, it turns to like a cottage cheese consistency, and it's easy to pick out. But in this scenario, it was weird because it was during the summer, so there was no reason for it to be frozen. And to make a long story short, we found out that he added Floetrol to it to make it, flow and level and look a little bit better on the wall. He said, and I called the chemist lab and I asked them. I said, "Hey, this guy added Floetrol to this paint, and it instantly curdled on him." And he said to me, he goes, "If we wanted it to flow and level that much, we would have made it flow and level that much. And we specifically designed it so that when Floetrol gets added to it or another flow and leveling agent, it instantly curdles because we don't want it done that way. That compromises the paint." And so I found that really interesting, and I'll never forget that, to this day. So, long story short, I would tell you, don't add flow and leveling agents to your paint. If you're going to need an extended, longer drying process, we say distilled water. And here's the reason why we say distilled water. I'll never forget, I was at a job site. They were using a product from Benjamin Moore called Scuffex, and they were using it on cabinets. And they were getting white streaking all over the place. And it was really weird. So I took the gallon back, and they would thin it when it would go into the sprayer. And they were using um, a Wagner power sprayer that you get at, like your big box stores. So it would have to be thinned quite a bit in order for it to work. So most of your latex paints shouldn't be going through a Wagner power sprayer. Most of them. They usually advertise stains because stains are a lot thinner. So that's one thing. If you got a Wagner power sprayer, don't. I wouldn't be spraying cabinets necessarily with it. You got to check all the instructions on what you can and can't use it with. But so I took it back to the office, and we have a handheld Graco unit, and we also had a 390 unit there, and I sprayed it out, no issue. I even thinned it a little bit with some distilled water, and no issue. So I went back to the job site, showed him what I came up with, and it was really interesting because I asked him, I said, "Are you guys thinning it with just like regular tap water?" He goes, "Yeah, we use the slop sink that we clean all of our brushes and rollers out of." And I should have taken a picture of this because it was just unbelievable. I mean, the hard water stains in there were crazy. So that's turned out what it was. It was the mineral deposits, the hard water that he was putting in there was causing an interaction with the paint. And as soon as we thinned it with distilled water, it went away. And again, we recommended not thinning it. He should have used a different product. I actually recommended using a different sprayer, something that can work better, like a Graco 390, or even some of the smaller handhelds out there would have worked much better. As far as thinning, always check a technical data sheet. That'll tell you right away whether or not you should or shouldn't thin a product. I know on the Benjamin Moore command side, at one point they didn't recommend thinning a product. Then they had a technical bulletin that they gave to painters saying you could thin it up to a certain percent. Um, All right, so I was doing some post editing here, and I realized that I didn't get a chance to put in here the information on the Benjamin Moore extender. So the big thing about the Benjamin Moore extender is you can see here it says it's specifically formulated to be used with their premium products without adversely affecting the dry film properties. So I wanted to put that in because I don't think there's any other companies that necessarily have something like this. And I think it's important that Benjamin Moore does have an extender. It doesn't do flow and leveling really. It just extends drying time. I know from my experience that there's a lot of people that use this on the Aura products. So that being said, I thought it was important to include this as their technical data sheet you can find right on their website. Again, I'll link the technical data sheet websites in the description. But as you can see here, it's nothing super fancy, but it does suggest uh, here what you can add. They say extender or water. So if it was still me, I would be using the extender over water just to protect myself in case something went wrong. So I wanted to throw that in here as a FYI for you when talking about the extenders. So you always got to check your technical data sheet. All the tech people that I've ever talked to, when they're pulling up something, unless they know for sure, they're looking at a tech data sheet. And I'll be sure to link in the description the technical data sheet websites for a couple of the main manufacturers like Benjamin Moore, Sherwin-Williams, Bear. I'll look that in there. So if you're looking and you want to know how much to thin your product by, or if you should thin it at all, you should check the tech data sheet page. And that'll give you all the info you need. And that's what most of the tech guys will actually look at when you call up with a problem. And in future videos, if you want, I'll be happy to go over, especially for contractors, what gives you the best shot to get a claim paid out and what you should and shouldn't say to the paint manufacturers or the sales reps. Essentially, they're going to be handling it, and that'll help give you the best chance of getting paid out on your claim, whether it's in paint or whether it's actual money. So if you want to hear that, let me know. I'll be sure to put that out on future videos if there's interest. And as always, I am here to help all the followers. And so if you got questions, put them in the comments section. Eventually, I'd like to get the channel to the point where we can just do a video on taking questions and providing feedback and helping people with their paint questions and paint problems for that matter. So I'd like to throw that out there too. And again, I'm here to help solve problems for you guys, kind of just like I've done in the past. So liquid sandpaper too. I hear this one a lot, or a deglosser, so to speak. Um, there's really no need for that. There is plenty of products out there that can help you do that. And really, the reason why that liquid sandpaper, liquid sand, liquid deglosser, even wiping stuff down with like an acetone or something isn't necessarily what I would highly suggest because it leaves contamination. You'd be much better off cleaning your substrate with a liquid degreaser as opposed to a liquid sandpaper. I think I might have mentioned a liquid degreaser before on accident, but liquid degreasers are fine because you want to get the grease off the surface. Liquid sandpaper, I would pass on those. There's just no need for it. So if you clean the surface, you can dull it down with just some sandpaper. I think the biggest misconception when it comes to liquid sandpaper and deglossing uh, is that it has to look dull. Clean, dull, and dry is what we say. But if you go through and you're scuffing up a glossy surface or something that's smooth, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to have scratches in the surface that you're doing. Taking a 150 grit or even a 200 grit sandpaper on a microscopic level is where you would see that. And that's going to give the paint the opportunity to bite in to the profile on that surface that you've now created. So that's one thing that's out there. Now, there is plenty of bonding primers that are out there as well that'll allow you to get onto glossy surfaces without even having to do that. You just got to make sure it's clean. There's a couple that have come to mind. Benjamin Moore has their Inselect sticks. There is the UMA primer, I believe that's from Zinzer, if I recall right. Uh, and then I think there's Extreme Bond from Sherwin, and there's plenty of other ones. I'll try to throw some pictures up on the screen of with can cuts of some of the other ones if I can find them. But those products work great. They're almost all in the description. You look at and see what they can stick to, and it's great. Now I will tell you too, there is plenty of other products out there like a 123 or some of your other main do-it-yourself all-around primers. In Aqualock, for example, is one. There's plenty of Sherwin ones from Sherwin that'll say hard to coat surfaces, but I will tell you that is an all-in-one primer. It doesn't necessarily mean that they do one thing really well. Whereas a bonding primer does one thing really well. It adheres to those hard to coat surfaces. If you're painting for whatever reason you want to paint glass, tile, something super smooth that's a high gloss finish or a semi gloss finish, you want to use a bonding primer. And that's what it does. Again, it does one thing really well, it bonds to hard to coat surfaces. Whereas those other products, it'll list that as a characteristic that it does well, but it doesn't do one thing really well, where a bonding primer does. Same can be said for stain blocking primers. Obviously, I think that's another video, but uh, a bonding primer is what you want. Forget the liquid sandpaper, the deglosser. Don't worry about any of that stuff. I would tell you keep it clean. If you really want to go over the top, scuff it up with a sanding pad, then put a bonding primer on it. The only thing you want to be cautious on with most bonding primers is they don't block stains. So I wouldn't necessarily put a bonding primer on a cabinet. You'd have to really see how glossy a surface is, but I would stay away from most bonding primers if you need a stain blocker. That might be maybe where all of those all-in-one primer kind of comes in, where it does everything, somewhat well. So that would be my advice to you on that. Uh, but I will tell you again, I think you can avoid those additives in there when it comes to flow and leveling or extending dry time. If you want to extend dry time, just put a little water in. A Dixie cup of water in a gallon is a lot. And the other thing that you have to remember too, when you're putting these additives in, like Floetrol or on an oil-based product, a Japan dryer, when you're painting a surface and you're adding something to it, that stuff will evaporate. So, if you thin a product by, 10%, and maybe I'll try to illustrate it uh, on the screen here, but if you're thinning a product, by 10%, that's 10% less when your product dries that you're going to have, film thickness on there. And relatively speaking, if you're painting if your paint on a microscopic level is this thick without thinning it, and you thin it 25%, now your finish coat is now going to be 25% thinner. I think a lot of people forget that when you're thinning a product, you are you are really compromising your finish coat. And if you really need flow and leveling, use a product that flows and levels better. If you're doing cabinetry and you don't like the look of a Pro Classic because it doesn't flow and level and you can still see brush marks, go to a different product. Switch your trim paint, switch it up to something that does have a little bit longer. Maybe go to an oil. There is a lot of modified oils that are out there. Benjamin Moore has a couple that are great. You have Advance, you have our door trim and cabinet. I know locally here, where we have Hellman Lindsay has a product that they're a small paint manufacturer in Wisconsin. They got a product called Aqua Elkid, and I'm sure there's other ones out there from other manufacturers. But use some of those. Try to avoid, those additives. And again, um, sometimes you have to thin it a little bit, and sometimes the manufacturers will recommend that. So look at your tech data sheets. Again, I'll leave those in the description below for you guys to check out. So that is my tip for you on you know adding stuff to paint, whether it's a flow and leveling agent, something to increase your dry time or decrease your dry time rather. Two, try to avoid it at all possible unless it specifically states it on a data sheet. And furthermore, if your paint manufacturer rep is saying you can do it, get it in the form of a text message or an email. Because if your product fails and they come back and tell you that it was thinned, you have something to document to say, hey, I was told I could do it. I would tell you that utmost, especially if you're a contractor, go and get it on on paper, so to speak, text message, email, whatever it is. So that way, if it does fail, you have documentation, so you don't wind up uh, having issues and then you're fronting for it. So, and I know some manufacturers are better than others when it comes to, paying out claims. Again, whether it's paint or whether it's paint and labor, most places kind of don't pay out the actual labor side depending on the claim. But yeah, so again, that is my info to you, painting contractor wise and homeowner wise. For whatever reason, if you're looking up something on the internet, don't do it. Stay away from it if you can, and hopefully that'll give you a better project in the end. It'll look good and you'll be happy with it. So I just want to thank you if you've stuck around to the end of this video. I hope it's helped you, and I hope you come back for more. So don't forget to click the subscribe button, and if you want to get notified, please hit the bell. If you found it informative too, maybe click the thumbs up. It'll help my channel grow, and that's what we're ultimately wanting to do. So thanks again for stopping by, and hopefully we'll see you on the next one.